Hi, folks. My name is Shitangshu, Executive Director of the Youth Impact Challenge. I'll be doing a fuller introduction for myself and my wonderful colleague here, Nidhi, as well. But I'm so glad to be beginning our workshop around ideation and stakeholder research. I want to reflect on something. It's a little bit of a weird, strange workshop in some ways. Usually we do our workshops live. It was actually something that we had initially been ready to do prior to YC's Round One Challenge, but due to some attendance issues, we kind of held off on that particular workshop and thought, hey, you know what will be most useful is for us to kind of record it instead, and at least there, even if people didn't sign up to that one, we think information is super relevant and super important. Folks have the information that they can consume on their own time. In particular, we're going to really highlight the value of the stakeholder research side, which is going to be extremely important for our round two teams that are not participating in YC, but even those ideation concepts will be very relevant as well. So excited to get into all of this. So today's agenda is we're going to kind of intro a couple things, in particular talk about ideation and strategies to kind of come up with the right idea. And how do you like sometimes you have so many different ideas in your head, so many different potential problems you can address, and how do we kind of navigate all that? We're going to talk about design thinking a little bit, really go into this idea of stakeholder research and how that is important in building your idea, and kind of wrap things up with a couple notes. So before I kind of continue, I do want to introduce our team and myself. My name is Shitangshu, and I serve as Executive Director of the Youth Impact Challenge. Pronounce he, him, his. But you know what? Outside of titles and whatnot, what I will say is I'm a youth innovator who has been on the other side. Maybe a bit older on the youth side now, but I've been on the other side of in the shoes of that team that's just building their idea. That's still at an early stage thing where they haven't quite refined it yet. That's trying to figure out how they can keep that project sustainable. That's still engaging with their stakeholders. And I know how tough it can be to build those ideas, how rewarding it can also be when you figure it out. And through a lot of lessons, some hard learned in when actually trying to develop ideas in real life. You get appreciate those opportunities where you can also be on the other side of the innovation support ecosystem. I live and work in the Unceded Ancestral Territories of the Mi'kmaq and Chipuktuk, which is also known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. Chipuktuk translates to the Great Harbor in Mi'kmaqi, and is really a beautiful part of Canada. I encourage everyone to come down, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here. So with that, I'm going to intro Nidhi. Who are you?
Hi everyone. So my name is Nidhi and I'm the education coordinator here at YIC. And fun fact, I used to be a YIC alumni. And yeah, and I maybe you might have heard of it, but we proposed an organization called BioSpecs, which is basically a STEM summer camp for youth. And yeah, now I'm here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you're even saying maybe you've heard of it because it's crazy how SpySpecs has really grown. And you know what? From a ceiling of an idea, and this is what he wanted. Why I see, it has now made, especially in the science education space, such an impact across so many parts of Canada. So kudos to you and the incredible work you all do. So just a note, by the way, Needy is in a bit of a special role here because I'm going to be delivering most of the content. I'm going to be essentially kind of go to for the actual presentation. However, there are many interactive elements, and then which this was initially designed for a larger audience. So Nidhi will be kind of sharing her input at certain points, but then also and maybe Nidhi, at the end, I'm going to ask you for your overall feedback and things of like tips to keep in mind when it comes to, taking all of these kind of lessons learned and whatnot. But there will be periods where I'm going to be drawing on Nidhi for hey, helping to interact and support those interactive engagement elements. So some things to keep in mind as we get going, and then especially as folks are still in those early stages of developing their idea, there are no bad ideas. Sometimes there's not the best execution. Sometimes there's it's like okay, initially it's let's have lots of ideas, but we really need to refine it to a specific project. That's a bit more impactful. But there are no bad ideas. We are all here to learn, and there are different ways of sharing. So be creative, and there is going to be a few interactive elements there, like I said, where Nidhi is going to kind of come in and support. And we're going to start off with one of them. So, just kind of a workshop that we or a sorry a exercise that we do in the with the intent of kind of showing just how of really just kind of cracking that creativity and just showing that sometimes there are solutions we never even imagined and we never even thought about. So we're going to start a kind of exercise here. We're going to ask you, Nidhi, to find an object that's near you, to come up with take a couple minutes to come up with a different use of the object. So pick your favorite use and then share with us. So, for example, I have here my wallet. So I'm going to say this is not a wallet. This is it's a paperweight. It is, it makes for a nice little hacky sack thing. Maybe I'll play a bit of hacky sack with it, right? I mean, it's kind of a bit heavy. Not mind you, it's very empty, but maybe I'll use it as a hammer, that kind of thing. So, again, let's be creative. So, a wallet isn't just a place where we keep our cards and money and stuff. It's also a place where it's also something that can have other uses. So, Nidhi, if you'll here take a couple minutes here, and whenever you're ready, you can share an object that's near you.
Yeah, I think I can actually
You go.
start right now.
Okay, go go.
Something near me is a blanket, or I guess it's a comforter, and instead of
Mhm.
using it just to sleep, you can use it for shelter, and you can use it to build forts and things like that, and like take cover under.
Yes, as you're talking, I was like, picnic. Let's go for a picnic, and then have a nice little picnic out there. Then there you go, right? So many uses for something like a blanket. Love that. So in that spirit, folks, sometimes you have a problem or an idea or an object, and there's actually so much more than what kind of meets the eye in terms of its use or the actual intricacies of that thing. And so I'm going to share here a graphic called the idea cycle, and that's very useful when you're trying to refine your project. So in the beginning, it's very important that we start with a problem, and actually start with a very real problem, which is important to you. Maybe Nita, can you give me a problem? Any problem that you think is worth tackling in the world? There are so many.
Um, Global warming.
Global warming. Okay, global warming is a big problem, but you know what? Within global warming, there's all these sub problems, right? And this is where the diagram is kind of going this way, right? So within global warming, there's the fact that we need to adapt to a changing climate, and you know what? There's a reality now that the Earth is going to be fundamentally hotter than it was at pre-industrial levels. And in my country of Bangladesh, I'm Bengali Canadian. Is My other country of Bangladesh is going to be 18% underwater by 2050. And that means there's going to be climate refugees. And so we need to adapt the world to climate. Within climate adaptation, there's subparts, right? There's the refugee crisis, the climate refugee crisis that needs to be dealt with. There is the infrastructure and the building things that we need to look at. There is the fact that, there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be passed on to different communities. So within adaptation, there's all these sub issues. Within global warming, there's a lot of folks who are working on that renewable energy space. Within the renewable energy space, there's also things like, okay, vehicle solutions are different from solutions to electrify or to take homes to a greener grid, which is different for, let's say, I had a chance to work in Kyrgyzstan, and there a lot of the question was, if you're in a remote community that's off grid, how do you explore energy there, right? So there we are looking at the greenhouse gas problem, but in a different way. You can look at the greenhouse gas problem and look at the education side of it. I mean, there are still skeptics when it comes to this question. How do you educate people effectively? How do you get young people more engaged? How do you get folks who are kind of more ingrained in their opinions at a political level willing to kind of listen to youth and others who have these issues? So the problem of global warming is actually so many sub problems. But here's the thing. So Nidhi, let me ask you a question. Can I deal with all of these sub problems in one solution?
No, definitely not.
Definitely not, right? So and this is where, we need our community. We need the YC community. We need the global community. We need everyone. Heads of shout out, by the way, we're on the Climate Change Makers Challenge. You just allowed an opportunity for us to kind of do a little marketing on that, Nidhi, and I appreciate it. The Climate Change Makers Challenge is a hackathon an ideathon that we run over the course of 2 to 3 days alongside another environmental organization called One for Earth, which I also, fortunately, have a leadership role at. And there, we bring young people. This year it was, I think, 200 something, and young people from all across the world this virtual space where they build ideas and things. So it's kind of you can think of it like a more condensed YC where you start with no idea and you end with like I think this year we had something like 40 odd innovations. And so the point being is you need multiple solutions. You need multiple people working on the problem. But then part of your challenge as the one person or your team, the one team is okay, which is the problem you're going to pick? And so you may look at all of those different problems and think about, okay, you know what makes sense for me is not so much the climate adaptation side, because that requires a certain level of maybe expertise and knowledge, which our team currently doesn't have. But where we do have a lot of knowledge is on the education side. So maybe that's the piece of global warming we're going to take a particular focus on. And especially, we're going to take a focus on that political advocacy side, given our experience. So depending on your experience, then you're starting to refine the problem. And depending on also, what is the problem that most impacts you? Perhaps my answer will be different if I am coming from an impacted community that experiences flooding on a regular basis. In that case, maybe that's what's going to drive me. So then you've got all these problems, and you have to refine it based on what drives you, the skills on your team, and also, and we're going to talk about this, the conversations you have with potential stakeholders. This is going to be a big thing that I want you to kind of center and when we talk about design brief, as you create this design brief of your idea, think about what is it to the stakeholders I want to impact and really need. Now then we've got, let's say, a specific subproblem. So let us say now we've got a specific subproblem of young people feel that they are not being heard and not just feel, young people are not heard properly when it comes to the political advocacy, political space around climate issues. It's a very real problem, and this is a thing that needs to change. So now, how might we deal with that? So, Nidhi, what are some of the things we might do to deal with this potential issue of political engagement for young people when it comes to climate?
We could make things like advocacy programs
Mm-hmm.
and other maybe fellowships that involves youth in these decisions.
Absolutely. So advocacy programs, fellowships, One for Earth, we had at one point supported with the local conference on youth, which brought the youth from all across Canada and talked about, okay, what are the things we created like a policy briefs that we kind of sent to the UN and others. And so, you can do conferences. You can do, shout out to, Youth Climate Lab, City Hive, and organizations like this, where sometimes the things they do, Shake Up Establishment, we've actually had folks from Shake Up Establishment play a role, apply at YC as well. Maybe it's a policy kind of document, right? It's like, here's a guidance so that if I'm a young person, I've got a kind of a guidance document to support me. There's lots of things we can do. So again, that one problem, one very specific subproblem has actually multiple solutions. And now we again need to refine the solution based on what are some of the things we might refine the solution based on, Nidhi?
Um, Maybe things like available funding and
There
available
you
like
go.
capabilities of people.
Resources, capabilities, and
Mhm.
hey, what is the thing keep talking to you about? Who should we to be talking to?
Stakeholders, target
Stakeholders,
audience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Stakeholders as well, right? After conversations with stakeholders, that can really help you define a solution. So let's say, imagine you're saying all these things that young people need without talking to a single young person, right? But then you talk to young people and they're like, you know what? We actually feel like there are enough conferences out there, but what's missing is this piece. Maybe it's what's missing is the funding piece. It's not a lack of intent for action. We are missing the funding. And it's hard for me to say what is actually missing, but I'm more kind of reflecting on the fact that talk to those stakeholders to identify the gaps, and then based on your capabilities and the like, we can pick a solution that is going to reflect your project. And let me say, for folks who are actively in the middle of projects, this idea cycle is a cycle. It continues, right? And your project will evolve. I'm sure Nidhi Biospecs has evolved through the years, right? And it's not always been the same. And so even the YC project, which you pitched, it's not exactly what was pitched, right? It has to evolve in order to really be responsive to the different factors and realities and the feedback that you receive. So now we're going to go into a exercise around refining the problem statement, and it's going to we're going to do a bit of a why, what, when, where, how kind of thing. And there's a couple questions I want folks to think about. So, first of all, think about from a yesterday we just finished a workshop called Starting with Why, and similarly, even when refining the idea, really think about your why. Like, what is the thing that drives you? What gives you the itch? Why is this an issue you even care about? What's the point of it, right? Don't just start a thing because, oh, I think, you know what, I'm going to make a lot of money doing it. I'm just going to start a thing because other people need it, even though I don't super get why they need it, right? Start a thing because you're like, I actually can see myself in something. I feel this need to change something, right? So there needs to be this internal motivation to really drive it and really reflect on your why. Think about who, when, and where. Like, who is your target market? We're going to have some slides that we're going to reflect on, which specifically looks at that. Map out the different stakeholders. There's, for example, with the political advocacy thing, we do not just need to look at youth and how do we engage them. We need to look at political institutions and how do we engage them so that they will listen to youth. So to have a one-sided, let's say, solution which only focuses on youth doesn't quite will have a limited impact. Looking at political institutions and being like, hey, are there ways that we can actually open avenues so that youth can approach you? That is an important part of the pie as well. And so we're going to share more about all of that in a little bit. Also to be shared more about is this question of, how can refine the problem further, talk to people, do that stakeholder research, stakeholder research, stakeholder research, stakeholder research. I'm going to like emphasize that continually because that's going to be a key kind of takeaway I want for you folks to do this project. By the way, when I reflect on those many projects I've done, the companies I've had to close down, there's times when you look back and you're like, if only we talked to people before we invested all this time and energy, resources, money into something, and that would have saved so much headache later, right? So it really cannot highlight enough how important stakeholder research is. And also just think about, what's our starting idea? So where just might start off, maybe your idea evolves, but think about those the unintended impacts it can have as well. I'm going to share a video which kind of intros systems thinking to a very high level, and there is a wonderful workshop likely to be running possibly next week, or if not, the week after around systems thinking. We're gonna have an external speaker kind of share their feedback. I mentioned this a little bit around the target market. And I'll just expand on this here. So when you think about your target market, really think about who ultimately are the folks who are going to be most impacted by your solution, and why would they even want this to be a thing? This is here. What is relevant is the geography, like where do you find them, how can they be reached, the psychography, and the values and goals. So, for example, with youth, maybe you're going to be focused on my solution is on those more apathetic youth who think there isn't as much hope in terms of their political advocacy, and we are trying to get them to see that there is value in actually pushing forward and doing things, right? And we want them to be politically engaged. Or maybe your psychography is those politically engaged people, and how do we make those politically engaged people more effective? So your program might be very different. Those are two very different programs. One is looking at engaging folks who maybe aren't as engaged. One is looking at allowing people who are engaged to be more effective. So think about those values and goals for your demographic. And then the demographics, this is age, race, other factors as well. There's things about your history that may be relevant, and how should that impact your work. There's often like so many solutions that impact different communities, whether it's a community, that's another part of the world, or or the indigenous communities that we have here in Canada, and newcomer communities. But sometimes what we have found in a very honest way at YIC is we have young people with the best intentions, saying that, oh, we're going to help all these folks, but then they don't actually talk to those folks and they don't actually know the history. And then that really does then impact the care to which they deliver their solution. And they might be very excited about their solution, but ultimately people they're trying to impact aren't excited. And that has sometimes that can have impacts too. Finally, behavioral. So when can you reach people and how do they normally behave? And this is also really important. For example, let's take the political engagement question. It might not be strategic for you to have a after school program, which is, hey, sign up if you're not politically engaged, and we're going to help you. Rather, you almost have to start at schools, right? Because that's where you can reach them. Because if you're not engaged, you're not going to sign up to a program, right? It's one of those things where just really think about where can you reach people so that and based on their behavior patterns, so that you can be most effective to your mission. There's this really beautiful diagram that I like here. It's called the stakeholder matrix, and I think is very valuable. What this really shows is the importance that there's often multiple different stakeholders in any given project. So, for example, maybe I'm going to ask kind of you again, prompt you again. If we are looking at that political advocacy for youth kind of problem, who are some of the key stakeholders in there that we need to ensure that we work at some level?
Well, we can think of like the CEOs of the companies that are like affecting maybe the are having environmental effects, community members like just maybe older people who aren't as yeah, well versed on these topics, maybe also other youth that are being affected by these things.
Love that. You know what? I exactly what you're saying, Nidhi, and there's so many different other folks, right? So like their parents are relevant, right? So you're
Mhm.
trying to impact the youth. Well, there's what do your parents think about this thing. If imagine if a youth is like part of the issue is the underlying. This is where you look at underlying issues is, hey, you know what? Yeah, sure, I care about climate, but like I can't even bring it up at home, right? I can't bring it up at home because it becomes a whole thing. And it's like and so now we have to look at that side as well, right? We have to look at the school system, maybe. We have to look at we have trouble reaching those CEOs and actually getting them to listen to us, or reaching to those government officials and getting them to listen to us. And so in this, depending on your solution, what this kind of reflects is there are certain stakeholders where you have maybe a duty to more just keep informed. So let's say, for example, depending on the nature of your program, maybe it's ultimately, okay, we need to keep the government informed about the things we're doing, but ultimately, let's say our specific program is not targeted towards them or anything. It's more just we just need to let you know what you're doing. So, for example, at YC, there's compliance things. We have to report to government about. We have to report publicly about some of our work. We have some of our financials. We have to report publicly as well, especially as a federally incorporated nonprofit. And so there's a kind of a duty that we have to keep the public informed. Especially given the kind of nonprofit status that we have. Now, there's also things that you might want to monitor, and it's like, okay, we don't necessarily need to like put too much energy into it, but we'll keep an eye out for things. So, for example, let's take the Youth Impact Challenge. We may want to monitor kind of trends in what's going on with older demographics. It's not necessarily the biggest thing for us, but nonetheless, it is still important. But it's like one of those things that we definitely want to be on top of, trends when it comes to the youth innovation space. But with an older community, it's maybe very relevant in some ways when there's like parents, but in others, it's like, okay, let's monitor and like, get a sense of what's going on, but also it's not the core thing. Now, where we now need to really work closely is, let's say, that keep satisfied group, because those are groups where there's high influence, even if there isn't as much interest. So think about schools, right? A school, they might not necessarily like run the Youth Impact Challenge, but it is very relevant for them to like they have a huge high influence on the stakeholders that we're trying to reach. And so, oh, my apologies, let me just turn the phone off there. So here, the you want to ensure they're kept satisfied. Another thing too, where this can be relevant is even like funders, right? So with funders, it's really important that we adhere to their restrictions. But usually, at least in our experience, our funders, they're not necessarily looking for like micromanagement of like the Youth Impact Challenge. They're saying these are your broad principles. We have a lot of influence because you know what we can do? We can just pull out the funding, and then you can't run the Youth Impact Challenge anymore. But they have a lot of influence, but ultimately their interest is like, okay, we make sure to keep us definitely informed, definitely like ensure you're listening to the guidance and the guidelines that we have given when we gave you the funding, but ultimately you don't need to share with us the intricacies of this happened with, the biospecs team, we had a mentorship call with them. They didn't necessarily know that intricacy. And then you've got the managed closely group. And those, like, for example, would be the youth, whether it's in the example you were talking about earlier with youth advocacy or even the work that we do at YC. And those are the ones where you're managing them at a different level. So I really encourage you folks that as you develop your ventures, think about all the different stakeholders and where might they fit here. Because each of those stakeholders requires a bit of a different treatment. And as you're refining your problem, you may want to think about, how you can impact, how is your problem impacting all of them in different ways. Now, we're going to put these ideas into action. So, Nidhi, I'm going to ask you to pick a problem you care about. You don't have to answer this immediately, by the way. And then there's some questions there. So, like, who are the key persons that are impacted by that problem? Thinking about geographic, psychographic, behavioral, demographic things. What are some notes that you might have about, the people impacted by the problem? Who are the different stakeholders? And maybe, like, where might they fit anything, and then share with the team. So I'm going to give you here a few minutes. Why don't we say 3 minutes and let you kind of come up with something. You can go off camera for a little bit as well. I'll keep you questions on screen. All right, need to feel free to take 30 more seconds if you need, or if you're ready, we can share. All right, we'll give it 30 more seconds.
I
You're good?
think I'm ready.
Okay, cool. What is a problem that you care about?
Okay, so problem is, and I actually have been seeing this pop up more and more, is the building of data centers in like
Mm-hmm.
cities
Mm-hmm.
and neighborhoods
Mm-hmm.
and local communities.
Mm-hmm.
So to go through this, key people, so going through the like matrix, key people that are affected, by this is older adults, people who live in rural areas, maybe people with pets, because I also saw on the news that like these centers emit
Mm-hmm.
loud noises that are very disrupting. So people
Mm-hmm.
who are used to, quieter neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And those might be people that you have to definitely manage closely because, or not, maybe not manage closely, as maybe they might not have higher influence as they are just, you know,
Mm,
community members and civilians, but you definitely want to keep them informed because they would have high interest in this, as this,
hmm.
directly impacts them. And people with high influence, I would definitely say, are the businesses and the companies that are making these data centers. We have to obviously target them the most. And then people maybe to monitor could be new parents. Maybe they care about like future generations. Maybe how might their children like grow up around these data centers. And yeah, and how to maybe reach these people could be through petitions and maybe even going door to door and also reaching them maybe after work or after hours. And yeah.
Okay. Love that. Just so many different key stakeholders there, right? Even the companies, right? The AI companies, like, look,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to engage them somehow? Because, and how are they going to try and skirt all the rules to try and get something going, right? So, and also, what are what are their reasons for wanting to do it? I can try and understand from their perspective as well. It's important, right? If you're going to address a problem fully. So yeah, lots of key people impacted by a problem. Each of them have different psychographic, geographic, demographic reasons. For example, from a psychographic thing, the values of that AI company are going to be very different than the values of, hey, you know what, I'm just living here. There's going to be very different than maybe, let's say, a young person who is like, hey, you know what, I also use AI. So, there's a bit of a different kind of interest, let's say, to your point of older versus younger. The demographic things are impacting the behavioral, the psychographic, the geographic, geographic, etc. And different stakeholders. Really good job. So thank you so much, Nidhi. I really appreciate that. Excellent. And now, a question becomes, how do you conduct effective research? And look, you put exclamation marks for a reason. Talk to real people. I can't emphasize this enough. I do feel like this is actually when we look at our top 20 teams, this has been maybe the factor that really stood out in terms of some of them versus others. Other some really fantastic ideas, but then there were some teams which really invested into actually trying to talk to real people and understanding the problem. And I like the little graphic here. By the way, a shout out here to Amanda, Arpita, Jessica, uh, Divya. There's several other folks. Maggie. There's many folks who historic staff who Oliver historic staff who essentially helped shape this presentation. This is a graphic that's from Amanda. I remember kind of her putting it there. And sometimes, look, you don't have to necessarily spend money on it. But it's just the idea. It can be intimidating to talk to real people, but try and figure out, reach out to your community even, and try and see how we can get there expert and non-expert opinions sometimes in terms of things. And you know what? This is one of those things too, where especially when you look at stakeholder research, sometimes we have all these research papers and these experts in the field, and of course their notes are very valuable. But to actually talk to a real person can really shape it. And there's been so many cases where, sure, experts have said X, Y, Z is the needs of a particular community, but you talk to the community and actually it's a very different kind of set of needs, right? So I really encourage research in different ways. Here I'm going to particularly reflect on this difference between secondary versus primary research. Secondary research is kind of where, it's like Google search. It is that reading the paper from a expert in these fields, so to speak. And those are very, very important, absolutely, in terms of integrating it to your proposal. But also underrated but essential, I would say, is a primary as well, where you're actually doing surveys and focus groups and interviews and talking to real people so that you're able to get more direct data. Now, here I'm going to add a notion of qualitative versus quantitative. Nidhi, you're in the sciences. I feel like you should know, you'll have an idea what this is. What is qualitative versus quantitative? What am I talking about here?
Sorry. So qualitative is anything that you can describe using things like maybe color or
Hmm.
behavior or emotion. So qualitative is especially important in things like psychology, where it's basically talking to people, getting their responses and
Mhm,
emotions on things, maybe
mhm,
behavioral. And then quantitative is anything with numbers. So this is,
mhm.
numerical like statistics, actual surveys you took, and the answers were, anything with numbers. So yes, anything like with numbers.
Exactly. So, and you can have qualitative, quantitative research in both primary and secondary. So, for example, with primary, qualitative research might be, hey, you have an interview where you ask deeper into questions, and if you say, where you talk about, why do you not like data centers, and people give you the reasons and a little bit more elaborately. Quantitative would be a survey question, which is like, how are you in support? To take it from a scale to 1 to 10, where 1 is you don't support it at all, and tendency you support it a lot. Do you support this data center being in a community? And then people give a quantitative response. Both are, both in that case as primary research if you're the one doing a survey and or the interview, but they each are kind of doing different things, right? In terms of you're getting different pieces of data. I will say each is valuable, and qualitative is also a little bit underrated. There's a lot of times people give the quantitative data, but the quantitative is also something that is a bit more measurable. It's a little bit it gives you better base points. Quantitative can also be very effective from a marketing standpoint or from being able to get funding and really share your story. And there are ways where both of those things are important in the same way that secondary and primary is important. So do your stakeholder research, folks, and talk to real people. And here we're going to now reflect on the earlier problem that you had, Nidhi, around this question of data centers in communities. So what are some ways that you might approach researching the issue? How can you ensure you're centering the target market in terms of your approach? And how are you mixing different elements of research, primary, qualitative, quantitative, primary, secondary, qualitative, quantitative, etc., and the different intersections? So I'll pause here. We'll give it a couple minutes and feel free to share once you're ready. Alrighty, Anita, how you doing there?
Doing good.
Do you need a bit more time, or are you
Um,
good to share back?
I think I'm ready to share.
Okay.
So for the issue that I chose, some ways that I would, research the issue is definitely always going to, scholarly sources, things like government websites,
Mhm,
even like company websites, even other countries, there are different levels of government websites
mhm,
there, maybe nonprofit organization and educational websites, because definitely it's important not to, go on things like blogs or people that aren't maybe what's the word, credible sources. And how I would ensure that I'm centering my target market. So I guess in this case, my target market would be people living in neighborhoods and communities that are used to quieter or that don't, really want this there.
mhm,
So I would always make searches with that group in the search bar or entry, if that makes
mhm,
sense. And, even when I talk to people, I would always bring up that group over and over just so there's no confusion. And
mhm,
mixing different research elements is I would make sure to definitely integrate many things, such as like doing interviews with people, making actual surveys, but then also finding actual numbers that maybe other
Mhm.
nonprofits and other websites have published on actual statistics that show negative impact of data centers, have some
Mhm.
numbers there. And yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Nidhi. You know what? I love the also the intent to kind of engage with other partners or organizations, other nonprofits. Look at what research they've done, and see like how that can support you. Or sometimes you have to look at a critical eye, and you're like, this industry research that says AI, AI centers are so great. May have some flaws, or maybe they don't, right? And maybe it's the opposite has happened. I've seen situations where people even sites that we want support are actually they fudge the numbers a bit, and we have to be reflective, honest about that. So yeah, well done. Thank you so much, Needy. My apologies, by the way. I did yawn a bit. I'm just very tired. Okay, we have 3 workshops today. We have 3 workshops in literally a 18 hours. I think I'm delivering 3 workshops, and there's a lot, and then there's also all the other stuff and everything. So my apologies for that. But okay, thank you. Good stuff. Now, this is we're gonna share this idea of the sandbox, and then basically, look, the whole idea here is that ideation is big and broad, but it isn't just about brainstorming. It's also about you have the brainstorming, but then there's actual engagement with people, right? It's important to come up with different solutions, and you're open to amending and changing your solutions. I've seen situations where people fall in love with their solution. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's the most beautiful thing ever. You know what? This is the most beautiful app, and I love it. It's so pretty. I would use it." But it's like, okay, yeah, sure, you would use it, but what about the other, thousands of potential customers or stakeholders, and that's important as well. So run those tests to help identify what is feasible. You try it out with folks, and not just yourself, and make sure that and see, is this something not just I will enjoy, but others will too. I'm going to introduce here to a concept called Scamper. And so the idea of Scamper is that when you sometimes as you have different solutions or ideas, you may want to take up pieces of it and combine them. So Nidhi, let me ask you, for this a data center problem, what are some actual things we might want to do or things that we could do?
We could definitely do things like signing petitions and things that
Mm-hmm.
can get these centers removed.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we could even stage things like protests and boycotts
Mm-hmm.
where we don't, engage with these companies.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And this is where, we talk about substitute. What is the idea of Scamper? So the idea of Scamper is, okay, let's take some of those many ideas you've shared and find a concrete thing that you're going to do, which will actually make it work. The idea with McDonald's, why are we putting that as an example, is this is something that, I think of like in when you have the menu, right? You've got a burger that, I can combine with other burgers. And then, you've got, you can be like, okay, no lettuce on that. There's different ways that you can have multiple meals even from one menu, so to speak, right? Or multiple kinds of meals. So similarly, a substitute. So maybe you're saying that you're not going to engage with them. Well, perhaps politically we should engage them a little bit because there's a necessity to do that. So we might substitute the engagement to say, okay, we're going to engage with them here, but we're not going to engage with them when it comes to us paying, right? Paying for their products, right? So there's a different kind of need. It's political engagement, yes, not pay engagement in my wallet. Combine, right? So maybe we can combine the protest piece that you've indicated alongside the petition piece. Adapt, and maybe adapt the petition so it's more focused on local nonprofits in the area, or maybe it's more focused on youth in the area. It's more focused on environmental organizations or whatever it is. Modify, magnify, minify, right? There might be things where like, okay, actually, you know what? Uh, this environmental angle isn't working as much, although it's interesting, and we're going to magnify the social angle a little bit more, right? And again, it's not to take away the environmental side. It's just, okay, we're going to magnify the impacts it has on the because we're seeing that this is working with the stakeholder. The government actually really cares about the fact that this AI data center is impacting people's health in some way, and so we're going to really focus on that side. And there are also environmental impacts, but it's not working. This argument is not working for our stakeholder, right? In terms of the government, we're trying to change the government here, and so and government policy, and so there may be a bit of magnify, minify, modify as you kind of adapt. Put into another use. Okay, maybe we like, okay, you know what? We did this survey. survey. It's a little bit weird. We're going to use the survey for another petition, for another thing, instead of for the one that we were planning on doing. Eliminate. There might be times when you're like, you know what, this thing isn't working. We tried to you try to do this protest thing, but no one's showing up. Maybe we need to like take that off our plans and really think about how we can focus our efforts on the petition side, right? And so there, and it depends on the context of the situation. And so you may need to eliminate certain things or rearrange where it's like, okay, we're going to do the petition first and then the protest instead of the protest first and then the petition, or we're going to do protest and we're going to get people to sign the petition during the protest itself. All to say, the idea with Scamper is there's many ways to combo things. Think about a fast food menu and how there's all these different ways where you can combo things. Think about any menu really, and all these different ways you can modify your order in order to get to a solution that ultimately will satisfy you. And not just have a you satisfy stakeholders and actually ultimately make an impact in for the problem you're trying to address. Now, I have shared here a slide from a workshop that is upcoming. So Jess is going to be running a workshop on human-centered design. I believe the time for that is Monday, August 10th, to tomorrow at 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. EDT. We really encourage people to go that. We're going to talk about design thinking in a little bit more depth. Design thinking high level is the idea that when you're creating any kind of solution, you want to be adaptable, you want to be responsive, those kinds of things. Many of the things that we've been talking about here, but in a lot more depth. I really like this diagram. Do you have any idea what this diagram is showing, Edie? If not, that is okay. It might be confusing. Okay, so what this diagram is showing is essentially how sometimes when we are building solutions, we get so excited by the end result. We're like, oh gosh, I love. Imagine if the person creating a car didn't start with a car. Didn't start with. Why don't just start with a car from the very beginning? So sometimes we have a solution. We're like, oh, okay, it has to have all these bells and whistles. It has this complex thing. When actually, what is the problem that car is solving?
What is the problem it's solving?
Yes.
Oh, so like transportation and
Yeah,
faster than walking.
exactly. It gets you from one place to the other faster. So another way you can address that, a skateboard. A skateboard is a very basic thing that gets you to one place to the other faster. So if I am a in early stage innovator, it is very strategic for me to not spend millions of dollars developing a concept for a car, but rather, a couple $100 developing a concept for a skateboard. Right. And now let's say you skateboard and then you test it out, or you test it out to real people and you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. But you know what? I can't ever go uphill with skateboard. It's kind of annoying. Okay, fair, fair. Let's create a cycle. Right? We're gonna have this bicycle element. So this is the idea: is when you're developing, each time you actually are solving the problem. Versus in a car, the other side of the diagram is okay. I'm gonna build a car from the get go, and but a wheel doesn't solve the problem by itself. The spokes don't solve the problem by itself. The body of the car doesn't solve the problem by itself. Rather, so you're creating a solution which over the 10 years of its that might be required for its development and all these different pieces, each piece never actually addressed the solution. Instead, start with a skateboard. Start with a skateboard. You go to a bike, you get a bit of feedback. Okay, uphill is hard. Okay, we're gonna go with the bike. Then people are like, you know what? When it's really uphill, I can't pedal that fast, and I can't do it. And so, all right, or we're gonna put an engine on there, right? And you've got an electric bike, and you've got a motorbike. You got a scooter, then you got a motorbike, and then it's like, okay, but sometimes you want to go a little bit further. Okay, you got a car now, right? A car to really help you go a little bit further, carry a bit more. And someone's like, oh, you know what? I need to transport cargo as well. Okay, let's grab a truck. The idea here being at every point of the agile development process, the problem is being addressed to some level. And instead of building the fanciest solution, which ultimately might not even be what someone needs, you'll say that you started with a car, and people are like, you know what? Like I know in Halifax, I was just having a conversation about how bikes within the city are so much faster than cars because of traffic. So ultimately, if you start with a car as your solution to transportation, it might actually be ineffective because what people really needed, or what most people needed, was a bike, and a bike would have sufficed. The point being is, take your innovation in small steps. One thing we're going to talk about likely at the call with Jess when she runs the workshop, the idea of a minimum viable product. And just think about what is realistic as an early stage innovation to launch and test out, and then from feedback, you get you develop. And as this idea of agile development, you build newer versions, but each time you are solving the problem. So now, let's put ideas into actions. I wanted to think about this earlier problem that you had, Nidhi, around this engagement when it comes to data centers. So think of some solutions, use Scamper, and potentially put them together. And how might you create a minimum viable product? I feel like we did kind of use that example in the Scamper with the Scamper methodology a
Mhm.
little bit. So I'm going to maybe challenge you to really focus on the third question. So what might be a minimum viable product, service, project that you're going to put forward that's in line with agile development as you combine some of those many ideas that you shared before? So what are you actually going to do? Now, we did this, we had the problem statement, we did this, we refined a bit, we did this, so we were like, a problem state, and now lots of solutions. Now let's refine. So Nidhi,
Mm.
you shared lots of different things you could do. You can take a
Yeah.
couple minutes, and what might you actually do?
Hmm. So in terms of making like an actual,
Yeah,
the minimum sort of thing that
viable
does
project. Yeah,
try to solve the problem, I would say can be things like at least, hey, we're letting people know this is happening. So
sure.
maybe
There you go.
information. So
Hmm.
we are, say, going through the community distributing flyers, maybe, or
Love it.
we are holding, I don't know, workshops of our own, or maybe we're youth and we're even making clubs and organizations that
There you go.
aim to
Yeah.
target this.
Yeah, and hey, clubs and organizations is another level, right? But maybe we are focused right now and initially is on the engagement piece. We could put some education out there. We get the word out. Did you even know the impacts of an AI data center in your community? Did you know that it would raise, power usage by all this? Did you know that it's going to drain all of these lakes that are in our nearby region? Let's get that information out there, and maybe then it's like a very and this is now a more realistic first step, perhaps, than creating a club in all these schools. It's a more realistic first step than having a protest. It's a more realistic
Mhm.
first step than some of the other great ideas, which are of course important. But from that information, sharing all that information, you can build and build and build and build.
Mhm.
Awesome. I'm going to share a couple things here. I'm not going to go in super detail. SWOT, this talks about a SWOT analysis and competitor matrix. One thing as you're building solutions is to really think about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of any solution, right? So, for example, let's say the strengths of hey, one thing that's nice about being more information centric is it's easy. It's an accessible thing that you can do. It's a realistic thing that you can do. My weakness is I might give you information, you're honestly going to act on it, right? So like, how do we make it actionable so that people are inspired to do something? An opportunity is that as the information gets out there, if you can get this information to the right policymakers, then maybe there's going to be some change on that end. But the threat is there's a lot of people who don't want this information to get out, right? That about the AI thing, and so think about all of those things when it comes to your solution as you refine it. Equally think about the competitor matrix. And here, look, sometimes it's not even competitors, it's even people who are already in this space. So there might be other nonprofits who are in this space and they're focused more on the petition side. So that's really important for you. If they're focused on the petition side, you want to align with their efforts and be like, as I inform about these impacts of AI, I'm going to point people to the petition that this other partner is doing. And there might also then still be solutions where it's more of a competitive thing, and it's like, okay, my solution does this, especially in these social enterprise or the for-profit space, my solution does this better than others for these reasons. So think about kind of these as ways to, as you further refine things, just understand your solution and reflect on how it interacts with the broader ecosystem of action that is out there. You'll notice that that kind of sense of broader ecosystem of action is a big part of the rubric that we have at YC, where you're asked to really think about what else is going on. I think in that note, I'm going to share with you one video that I think is really interesting and talks about unintended impacts that it can have. And we're going to think about how, what are some examples of situations where, we meant to do something helpful. Sometimes, like all of you, when you come up with your solutions, you will want to do something helpful. But part of the reason we're asking you to do this kind of SWOT analysis, competitor matrix, is also to really think about what impact are we having on everything else and all that kind of stuff, and our impacts are other things having on us. And I'm going to kind of end with a kind of a question discussion around AI, and just share some general notes. Although I'll reflect that a lot of this will perhaps be explored more in future workshops, and very likely the HCD one as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and reshare to specifically go to one tab where we have our systems thinking, a video on systems thinking, and I think is going to be helpful. Let me know if this plays. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to. All right, there you go. Can you hear, Nidhi?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So as you reflect on this, just think about how sometimes the most well-intended solutions that you might come up with or others might come up with have unintended impacts.
Sorry, I can't hear the audio of it.
Oh, was that from the beginning? You couldn't hear the audio, or
No, in the beginning I heard it, but now I
now it
can't.
disappeared? Oh, that is strange. Okay, all right. I'm gonna just reshare it, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, it shares okay. Let me know at what point. Where, like here, when did you stop? When did the audio stop working?
No, it was towards the beginning, but when you played it initially, like when you asked me first, can you hear it? I could hear
Okay,
it.
I'll play it from the beginning. It might mean our
Yeah.
workshop runs a bit longer. That's okay.
Okay, yeah,
Can you
now
hear?
it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
In the 1950s, the Dayak people of Borneo, an island in Southeast Asia, were suffering from an outbreak of malaria. So they called the World Health Organization for help. The World Health Organization had a ready-made solution, which was to spray copious amounts of DDT around the island. With the application of DDT, the mosquitoes that carried the malaria were knocked down, and so was the malaria. There were some interesting side effects, though. The first was that the roofs of people's houses began to collapse on their heads. Turns out the DDT not only killed off the malaria-carrying mosquitoes, but it also killed a species of parasitic wasp that had controlled a population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Thatch being what the roofs of the Dayak people's homes were made from. Without the wasps, the caterpillars multiplied and flourished and began munching their way through the villagers' roofs. That was just the beginning. The DDT affected a lot of the island's other insects, which were eaten by the resident population of small lizards called geckos. The biological half-life of DDT is around 8 years, so animals like geckos do not metabolize it very fast. It stays in their system for a long time. Over time, the geckos began to accumulate pretty high levels of DDT, and while they tolerated the DDT fairly well, the island's resident cats, which dined on the geckos, did not. The cats ate the geckos, and the DDT contained in the geckos killed the cats. With the cats gone, the island's population of rats came out to play. We all know what happens when rats multiply and flourish. Pretty soon the Dayak people were back on the phone to the World Health Organization, only this time it wasn't malaria that was the problem. It was the plague and the destruction of their grain stores, both of which were caused by the overpopulation of rats. This time, though, the World Health Organization didn't have a ready-made solution and had to invent one. What did they do? They decided to parachute live cats into Borneo. Operation Cat Drop occurred courtesy of the Royal Air Force and eventually stabilized the situation.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and consider becoming a patron by making
so
more for each new video we create.
what are your thoughts?
Cannot make videos without you, and thank you for watching.
Oh, that was very interesting. I found it really cool how there was such a like cascade of things that happened just because of one thing.
Mm. And the AI data centers, you can think, oh, it's just
Yeah.
but then, okay, we build an AI data center here, and then what are the cascading impacts it has on this person, this person, this person, and then this
Mhm.
person impact on this person, and there's so many things that we often, some that are hard to predict, but some which, with a bit of forethought and foresight and consideration can be predicted and need to be considered. So yeah, absolutely. When you are developing your solution, as they say there, employ these design thinking kind of principles, employ a stakeholder research, talk to the people on the ground. Maybe that's something that the WHO should have done a little bit better, and really think about, how a well-intended solution, what are the impacts it has, positive and negative. And honestly, almost every solution we have, even if they make an overall positive impact on the social and environmental end, can have some negative impacts. And so just think about those considerations as well. And doesn't mean that it's not worth exploring. It just means that, you just need to consider it, mitigate them, and really reflect on all the potential areas of impact with a project in different ways. Okay. I'm going to maybe just ask, end on one question here. I want to connect all this with AI. Because AI is one of those other things where, there's so many different ways it can be used and has so many different impacts, many unintended. So I guess a question I might have for you, Nidhi, is how do you think AI should be used for ideation, and how can it be a good tool in ideation, and where must we be careful?
Definitely, it can be used for the initial, like maybe what's the word? A prompting of ideas. So say you have an idea, but you're not sure if it really sounds right, or you're not sure if there's some flaws in it. You could ask it clarification questions, or maybe you can ask it to redirect you elsewhere. Where we must be careful is where we let it take full control. So we tell it, just do this for us, or do this for us, or do that for us. And oftentimes it can be inaccurate. So we might not, it may suggest faulty ideas, or it might not take the right people into consideration.
Really good points on all fronts. I love the last point about taking the right people into consideration. Sometimes there has been a lot of research showing how AI has its biases, right? It has this biases where a lot of marginalized communities who may not have had the same level of online profile, they're not necessarily considered in AI documentation. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, I was just agreeing.
Yeah. And then equally, I think AI absolutely has a value in helping us kind of especially on a best practice standpoint, be like, okay, can you identify based on all the data you've been trained on some best practices for
Mhm.
something, right? Even for example, maybe you're working on impact report for YIC, best practices
Yeah.
around an impact report for creating an impact report for YIC, but then it requires the human to come in and also like really think about, okay, how do we actually then tailor that to our needs? And so there are ways that it can be used very effectively, but then also lots of ways where definitely we need to just be careful. And this especially when it's true when it comes to those proposals, folks. Don't be using AI, please. For to completely generate a proposal. It's one thing where it's like, hey, you know what? I need some challenges navigating this research. Can you help me understand a little bit more? It's one thing to say, you know what, the wording of it isn't quite as smooth. Can you make it a little bit more professional? It's another thing to like be like, hey, can you generate a 3-page proposal? Because in truth, the AI nowadays can, but it's not going to be a great proposal. And honestly, we can often tell. We've had judges who are like, hey, I'm pretty sure this is almost all AI, and those kind of impacting how proposals did as well, right? Because ultimately we want to that impacts the quality of the submission. And so yeah, be very careful when it comes to use of AI. I think a big thing is, it is a tool. It is not it is a tool that needs a human being to wield it and use it in the right way. There's going to be a lot more AI that will come in future kind of guidance and things, but I'll share that for now. And with that, those are some of the key principles that we are sharing about ideation. It's not so much design thinking fully, but a little bit of design thinking and particular stakeholder research. Nidhi, do you have any questions for us or anything that you would like to add?
No, it all sounded really good. Oh, well, I was thinking one thing, in the
Mhm.
previous slide where it was like things affect other things. In our example of the data centers, maybe if we stop building those centers, it could result in job loss of people
There
who
you go.
worked at like
There you go.
the data companies or needed the
Yeah.
AI thing to for their job. So that could be a
Hey,
potential downside.
absolutely. There you go. And you know what? Sometimes there is a bit of a, hey, not in my backyard thing where it's like, hey, yeah, you can build it anywhere else, but not here. But then it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but then where do we build it in a way that is has the least impact? Because and because we are many of us, we are both using AI, but then saying we don't want an AI center built in our communities, right? So we need to like think critically about those things as well, and yeah, just how we might consider all of them. So really good point there, Nidhi. And Nidhi, as we reflect on the presentation as a whole, is there anything that you want our participants to take away from as it relates to market research, ideation, anything like that? You have been an alumni yourself. Feel free to give our audience some advice and tips as they navigate these kinds of questions.
I would say not only doing the research, but always integrating it at every step of your
Mm,
competition submissions. So, doing things like including testimonials and actual quotations in
love that.
your submissions will definitely maybe give you a step up.
100%. Integrating all that hard research you're doing and actually putting into action. I've had so many situations where someone tells me, I talked to this, and I'm like, but it's not in your proposal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you're doing that hard work, make sure that you're also reflecting it and putting it as part of your story when it comes to presenting your pitch. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thank you so much to others who are watching this call. Thank you to also the many peoples from the past YC teams who have helped shape this presentation. I appreciate you all and excited to see your submissions.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye bye.